Hello, and welcome to my studio gallery here in Morro Bay, California. My name is Dave Rogers, and today I'll be sharing with you a quick excerpt from my Watercolor Mastery workshop, California Lighthouse. And this will be a quick video on how to paint soft glowing clouds with the dry brush technique. So it should be a lot of fun. And in this video, you'll also get a glimpse into the learn by doing method, which is where I kind of show you the how and the why of the technique. We practice the technique and then apply the technique to the watercolor painting. And what the learn by doing technique is designed to do, really, in essence, is to give you the confidence to be able to perform these techniques on your own. And if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. And if you'd like to know more information about the Watercolor Mastery Workshop, California Lighthouse, you can find that link down in the description below. So we're actually going to start again with these lightest values in the background. But the first thing that we need to do, obviously, would be to mix up some paint that we're going to use. We're going to start with our sky color. The sky color is going to go right here behind these clouds. Okay, that's where the sky color is going to go. So the first thing we need to do is to mix up that color. So how do we do that? We're going to take our number 12 round, okay? And what we're going to do is we're actually going to load up the brush, and just so that you know what I'm doing here. Let me just get to my fly on the wall can. You're going to load up our brush just like this. You should have a clean water and a dirty water. Okay, the dirty water is for rinsing all the pigment out of your brush. The clean water is for things like creating washes or creating if you need to wet the paper with a nice clean layer of water, you've got clean water to do that with. So you should have two waters on your painting station. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to load up that brush with water. We're just going to take some of that water and we're just going to put it right into our palette, right down here where this last well is. We're going to put maybe about the size of a quarter little puddle of water right in the bottom of the palette there. So we're going to start with the water, and we're going to create what you could call a tea consistency. Think of tea consistency when we're creating this first wash. We're going to grab a little bit of that cobalt blue right off the edge of the little pile that we created there. And we're going to put it right into the puddle of paint or puddle of water. And we're going to bring that up to that tea consistency that we're looking for. Maybe just a tiny bit more. Going to bring it right up to that tea consistency. Okay. Now, once we have that, now let me show you exactly what I'm talking about when I say tea consistency. I've got some practice paper here somewhere. It's always, if you're wondering, gosh, do I have the right consistency? Check it out. Take your practice paper, make a little swatch of color there. Does that look like a good sky color? To me, that looks pretty close. Okay, it could actually be even a little bit darker than that if I wanted it to. So I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to rinse it out, get a little bit more water, grab a little bit more paint, make it a little bit more saturated. Okay, a little bit more saturated. And how does that look? That looks pretty good too. Okay, that could work. That could work. That could be our sky color. All right. Okay, so we're going to use a technique here called dry brushing. Dry brushing. What do I mean by dry brushing? What I'm talking about, first of all, we're going to switch gears here just for a moment. We're going to put our number 12 aside and grab your number 8. Grab your number 8 round. That is the one that's right in the middle. Okay, not the biggest one, not the smallest one, the one that's right in the middle. All right, in size. Grab your number 8 round, and we're going to get it nice and wet so that you always start off with a nice damp brush. And we're going to use what's called a dry brush technique. What I'm talking about is, you see these edges here, these this outside edge of the cloud. We want to create that with a wash that's going to go behind the cloud, which is the blue. All right. So we're going to create that edge with this brush stroke. Now you can see that we've got some pencil lines here already. What I'd like for you to do is to take your eraser and just lighten those up as much as you can. I want you to still be able to see them, but those are really only a guide. That line is really just a guideline. It's just a guideline to tell you where to stop with this technique that I'm going to show you. All right. Just a guideline. So the technique is, what I'd like you guys to do is to get your practice paper and follow along here, and everybody give this a try. Okay. Your number 8 round, I want you to hold it just like this. Hold it in a palm down fashion, because this technique, we're actually going to use the belly of the brush. See this fat part right here? That's the belly. Okay, that's the belly of the brush. So we're going to load up the brush. Not too much pigment. It just needs to be damp with pigment. Okay, so not too much. So if you load up the brush, you can use the belly of the brush again in a palm down fashion. So the brush really is kind of flat with the paper, and we're just going to use a stroke that looks a little bit like this. Okay, get a little bit more pigment so you guys can see what I'm doing. And what is that doing? What is that doing? It's creating this rough edge. Can you guys see that? Okay. It's creating this edge. It's creating this dry brush edge. And that dry brush edge is what we're going to create right here. That's how that edge is created. Okay. Everybody give that a try. Palm down fashion, just like this. I'm going to use the belly of the brush. And we're just going to, we're going to use the, we're using what really creates this effect more than anything else. It's not necessarily the brush as much as it is the paper, because the paper has texture, right? So the brush is just kind of skipping along. It's skipping along the tops of those little hills on the paper where the texture is, and it's leaving the white. The white mark is really just kind of the valleys of that texture. Can you see the texture on that paper? Okay, that's what's creating the effect more than anything else. All right, it's not necessarily the brush as much as it is the paper. Okay, let me know when you. Okay, now I want you guys to watch how I tackle these clouds just for a moment. Okay, I'm going to do the clouds over here on this left side. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with a loaded brush. Okay, I've really loaded this with pigment, and you'll see every time I go to grab pigment from my palette, I'm always mixing. Why do I do that? It's because the pigment is heavier than the water, and it's going to tend to want to drop out of that water. So whenever you load your brush, always remember just to give it a little swirl so that you're mixing it up again. You're mixing up your pigment. Now, with a loaded brush, I'm going to use that same technique, but I'm going to start up here at the top where I know that's going to need a lot of pigment. Okay, and as I'm moving down to where the edge of the cloud is, my brush is going to get leaner. Okay, it's meaning that it's going to start running out of pigment, meaning that it's going to be a perfect opportunity to create that dry brush effect that we're talking about. Okay, you guys want to see how this is done? Here we go. I'm going to start right up here at the top. Same technique, palm down fashion, belly of the brush. I'm going to put the majority of the pigment right there where I know that it's going to want to go. All right. Now the brush is getting leaner. It's starting to run out of pigment. And I can really just use those light brush strokes to create that edge. Can you see how that happened? Look at that. Look at that. Now you see that the pencil line really is just a guideline, right? I'm not trying to paint within the lines here. I'm just using that as a guideline. Start at the top of the shape. Start at the top of the sky shape, so you got plenty of pigment there. Okay, the brush gets a little bit leaner. You can use that technique just to lightly create. Again, it's just a guideline. Don't worry about painting within the lines. It's not important. Okay, allow the brush and the paper to become a part of this creative process, guys. That is what creates spontaneous and energetic watercolors that look like they painted themselves. Okay, and that's what we want. So did you so that process, that learn by doing process, right? Talk about the how and the why, practice that technique, get a little confidence, apply the technique. That's how this whole workshop is going to go from start to finish. All right. The next wash that we're going to create is actually going to be the shadow area of the clouds themselves. The shadow of the clouds. All right, we're going to give these clouds a little bit of dimension. Right now, they're a little bit too stark white. Okay, so we're going to give them a little bit more dimension. The way that we do that is with a shadow. All right, well, how do we create that shadow? It's got a lot of nice soft edges. All right, this is done with what's called a wet and wet wash. Wet and wet wash. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create some pigment. Okay, we're going to create some pigment to paint with. So the first thing we want to do is we want to put some water in our palette. Okay, so we're going to mix some paint for the clouds. It's going to be a wet and wet process. First color that we want to create is going to be a tea consistency. All right, and it's going to be a kind of the middle of the road yellow. When I say middle of the road yellow, it's actually going to be a combination of our lemon yellow along with a little bit of the raw sienna. We're going to start with the lemon yellow. And we're just going to, again, number 12 brown. We're going to take some of that lemon yellow right out of the edge of our little pile that we put in there and put it right into that little puddle of water. And we're going to bring it to that tea consistency. Okay, but that's not quite dark enough. We need to warm it up just a little bit. And the way that we're going to do that is with a little bit of that raw sienna. A little bit of the raw sienna, just a little bit is all you need. What we're looking for, again, we're just going to test it, see what it looks like. That's some. If you want to test it on the back of that practice paper, that's fine too. Totally up to you. But we're going to test it. That's going to look something like that. Something like that. Next color is going to be what? Any guesses? It's going to be a tea consistency, alizarin crimson. Tea consistency, alizarin crimson. And how do you know if it's correct? Well, we're going to test it. That looks pretty good. What's the next color going to be? Well, we're going to use this blue that we already have down here that we created our sky color with. Okay, but we need to have a little bit more water. Need to add a little bit more because there's not quite enough pigment there. So we're going to put a little bit more water. We're going to bring it back up to that tea consistency. Primary colors. What I want you to know, what I'm telling you right now, is that this is a universal technique for painting any sky. Okay, you can paint any sky. I don't care what the weather is. I don't care if it's nighttime. I don't care if it's a sunny day. Whatever, makes zero difference. Every sky can be painted with a combination of the primaries. Why? Because when you get into these neutrals, when I say neutrals, what creates a neutral is when you mix primaries together. Okay, or if you mix complementary colors together, you're going to get what's called a neutral. All right. Every sky is a combination of this, either the neutral that is created from these three primaries, or you've got your blue that may lean warm or cool. You've got your purples and your yellows that may lean to one side of a primary to another. What I'm getting at is it's always a combination of these three. Always, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a minute. Okay, so we're going to do what's called a wet and wet wash. A wet and wet wash. All right, there's really no need to practice this because it is so, I'm telling you, it's so simple. Okay, it's so simple. I'm going to show you guys very quickly. All right, how to do this. I don't want you to psych yourselves out, because it's really a lot easier than it looks. Okay, it's a lot easier than it looks. So the first thing we want to do is we want to bring this blue that we've created down here, this tea consistency blue, we want to bring that blue to a little bit more of a purple. Okay, so we're going to add a little bit of that alizarin crimson to it. Okay, a little bit of that alizarin crimson. So the first thing we're going to do when you create a wet and wet wash, wet and wet is just like just like it sounds. All right, we need to have a wet surface on the paper to put wet paint into. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to take water by itself. Okay, water by itself, and we're going to paint the clouds where we want this shadow to go. Okay, now here's the thing though, we're not using any masking fluid in this painting. We're not using any masking fluid. So anywhere where you have a white shape like this, see the lighthouse here? This shape, I want you to paint around it, okay? You don't have to necessarily avoid the top of it because that's going to be a darker value of paint. Okay, it's going to be darker than what's behind it. So you don't have to worry about painting around the top of the lighthouse. But down here on the bottom part of the lighthouse, yes, you definitely want to paint around that shape with the water. Okay, we're just going to paint with water by itself right now. Okay, so what I'd like everybody to do, you can do this at the same time that I'm doing it because it's just super easy, okay? When you paint though, I want you to leave about maybe about a quarter of an inch to a half an inch of white space between the water and that outside edge of the cloud. Okay, why? Because we want to have this effect of turning the shape with temperature. Okay, we want to have that lightest area for the edge. We're going to save that lightest area for the edge. And then it's going to gradually get darker and darker as it goes down here to the bottom. So here we go. Number 12 round, we're just going to paint the cloud shape. Going to paint the cloud shape. And we're going to just make sure that you stay away from that edge of the cloud. You're going to paint around the lighthouse. Remember, you can paint through the top of the lighthouse, no big deal. But when you get down here to the bottom, just try to, when you paint, again, we're painting with water, paint around this shape. Take your time. We're going to paint around the rooftops that are below that shape. Okay, that's where our cloud shadow is going to stop. Okay, so paint around those rooftops, paint around the lighthouse, make sure it's nice and wet. You're going to have to keep filling up your brush because you're going to run out of water. Okay, but just keep moving that wet wash. These little chimneys on the top of these houses are going to be a dark value also. So you can paint right through those two, just like you did with the top of the lighthouse. But we're going to paint all from left all the way over to the right, or vice versa if you're left-handed. Going to paint right up to the horizon line here on the bottom. That's going to be our edge. That's where we're going to stop. And we're going to bring that moisture right up here, not quite to the edge of the cloud. And it doesn't have to be a perfect edge. In fact, the less perfect the edge, the better when you get close to those cloud shapes. But when you get to the end, you want to wet your brush and go back over here to this side and just make sure that it's still nice and wet. Okay. So we're just going to, now there's a timing issue that we have to worry about here. Okay. There's an optimal point of time that we want to take advantage of when we add our first wash of color here. All right. And that is, we've got to allow that water just a couple of minutes to soak into the paper. Otherwise, when we put a color on here, it's just going to go everywhere. Okay, we want it to have these nice soft edges, but we also want to kind of have it stay where we put it, right? So we're just going to give it a minute to soak in. So the next step, we're just like any other watercolor, guys. Any other watercolor, we're going to go from light to dark, light to dark. So we're going to start with our lightest pigment, our lightest color, which is the yellow. Okay. Now it's not going to be yellow all the way across, right? We want it to look natural. We want it to look organic. So we want to put yellow where we put our yellow. Imagine the light coming from right to left, right to left. Where would the light, if yellow is the light, okay, where would the light land on that cloud? Where would the light land on the cloud? and put it there. Just drop it in, just like that. Drop in your yellow. Drop in your yellow on the cloud. Just like I did there. Now you're going to notice you might have some puddling of water at the bottom of that wash. Your board is tilted, remember? The water is running towards you. Very predictable. It's trying to escape. So you have to let it. How do you get rid of the water? That little puddle of water, just take your brush, squeeze some of the water out of it, and touch that puddle. And let the brush soak it back up like a vacuum cleaner. All right. Now we don't want to wait too long because this wash is drying. Okay, so we have to be careful. What's next? Well, we're moving around the color wheel. We're gonna pick up our next darkest color, which is gonna be our alizarin crimson or our red. Now, where do you suppose that red could go? My guess is if the sun is coming this way, if the light is hitting the clouds from the left, it might be transitioning into a reddish color after somewhere behind that yellow, right? Probably transitioning into red right behind the yellow. So just drop in the red right behind the yellow, just like that, number 12 round. Again, every time you do this, you're going to notice, because we keep adding water, right? We keep adding water to the painting. So we got to pick up all the excess. Got to pick up all that excess. Maybe there's a little bit of that red over here. I'm just going to drop a little bit over here. Got to keep picking up that excess water. Now you can probably guess what's going to happen next, right? We're going to let that soak in for a moment. Let that paper get back to that state. We're looking for that window, the most opportune time to add our color. So we're going to, the way that you know that the paper is ready is it's going to go from like a shiny look to more of a sheen. Okay, it's going to be like this dull shine. All right, it's getting pretty close. So we're going to pick up our purple now. And you can probably already guess, right? If the light is coming from the right to the left, what's going to happen? We're going to get a shadow. We're going to get a shadow right down here. Right down in here. Again, we want to be random. We want to be careful to avoid those shapes, right? You want to avoid the lighthouse shape that we created. You want to avoid the house shapes that we painted. But all of this down here, underneath that edge of the cloud, is going to be shadow. It's all going to be shadow. And again, if you want it to look natural, if you want it to look organic, add some variation in there. Add some variation. Now, what's going to happen is everywhere where the color mixes, that purple is going to mix with the yellow and the red. And what's going to happen? They're going to neutralize. And that's what we want. That's what we want. The type of wash that we have here is actually a variegated wash. A variegated wash, the root word there is vary, okay? Variegated just means a wash with varied colors, various colors. All right. So very colorful clouds, wouldn't you agree? Very interesting. That's kind of the whole point. Kind of the whole point. Now, if you wanted your car, what would you do if you wanted to have your clouds just be a little bit darker? What would you do? If you wanted them to be a little bit darker, what I would do, I would probably, this is optional if you guys want to do this, totally up to you. But you could actually grab a little bit of that, indigo and add it to your purple. Now remember, what's the rule about indigo? Okay, a little bit of indigo goes a long way. So you could actually add a little bit of that indigo to your blue mix make it just a little bit darker. And if you wanted to, you could drop a little bit of that in there. If you want your clouds to be a little bit darker, where are they going to be the darkest? Right at the bottom. So that's where you put it, right at the bottom. And that's going to make your clouds just a little bit darker if you want them to be a little bit darker. Totally up to you. Totally up to you. But as always, again, you're going to get these puddles. You keep adding water to the same wash. So you need to take care of that. You need to clean house here a little bit. Pick up that excess where it's puddling on the paper and just let those colors mingle. I hope you enjoyed this video today, and this was just a small excerpt from the Watercolor Mastery Workshop California Lighthouse, where we cover everything from skies to waves to beaches, even down to the lighthouse details. If you'd like to paint along to the full workshop, just click the link in the description below, and we'll see you there. Take care and happy painting.